What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Indie Super YouTube channel and the JP and Trav show. As always, it's your boy JP. To the bottom right of me, if you can see him, I have my esteemed co-host Travis Davidson, who's on his way back from Norman as we speak. Trav, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great. Just making my way back from the OU basketball game. And excited to have our esteemed colleagues on, our guests. Appreciate you guys.
Man, happy to be on. Appreciate you having us.
Yeah, appreciate the invite.
Yeah, it's a great time anytime we can get people like Ty, who's been here from Roundtable Sports. He's a big friend of the show. But also being able to get a guy like JD, who again is one of the fastest writers in football media, works for On Sport. And JD, we're so grateful that you decided to come on the show with us, man. How you doing tonight?
Oh, no, man. Pleasure is all mine. Anytime you got Ty Hayes in the cut, I'm there. I mean, talk about one of the best in the space. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel or to Around the Table Sports, would definitely recommend you do so. So, no, I'm glad to be here, man. Appreciate y'all having me on, and excited to talk some ball with y'all.
Oh, yeah. Should be a good time. Now, I know I guess we are getting a little bit of echo in the
there you go.
In the comment section. I know people are saying
I don't know what you
that
just
we have
did,
some,
but that
so
helped.
we'll try to figure that out as we go through. But yeah, let's just go ahead and start. I really wanted to talk about, to start off, and I know we only got a little bit of time here with everybody. I want to talk about OU season. Obviously, most of the people that are here, they understand what Trav and I's opinion is. We've been talking about it every week, all year. But I'd love to get Ty's opinion as somebody who's been here a lot. And then I really, JD, would love to get your opinion. I watched one of your videos on Oklahoma. I think it was a week and a half or so ago. And man, I really loved your analysis and what you had to say. I thought it was fair. It wasn't a homer take or anything like that. You're not an Oklahoma fan, but I thought what you said was fair, and I thought a lot of Oklahoma fans could really benefit from it. So, Ty, go ahead and give your synopsis of the season, and should Oklahoma fans be freaking out? What do you think? Then we'll go to JD, and then Trav. I'll let you kind of follow that up as we round that out.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is it's always scary when you see a program at Oklahoma's status have the season they did, but should you freak out? Absolutely not. It's year one with Brent Venables' first year as a head coach, and the team absolutely improved as the season went on. I think one of the most telling things is, how did you play in your last game when you had all those opt-outs, right? And there was a lot of effort on that football field. I think you have to be optimistic about a lot of what you saw on that football field. And this harkens me back to something Nick Saban talked about once, and talking about like meritocracy and societal views of how we view underdogs. And Saban was talking about how it's ironic that as a society, we always strive for like this meritocracy and wanting to hit the top, but yet we root for the underdogs, which seems kind of a weird paradox to trying to implement a system of meritocracy. And I think for a lot of people outside the Oklahoma fan base, you're going to hear a lot of chirping, because Oklahoma has consistently been near the top of college football, right? And so it's kind of this same theory as we as a society try and implement meritocracy, but a lot of the teams that are at the top, the second they have a down year, everybody starts talking. Alabama doesn't make the playoffs, and you would think that Nick Saban has had 5 losing seasons, right? Like, it's just a lot of conjecture. And so, no, I don't think Oklahoma fans need to be worried at all. There was a lot of learning that went on this season. I think that a great sign is the effort you saw in that bowl game. Like, there was want to in that bowl game, and I thought it was palpable.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think, Ty, you hit it on the head with the culture. Everything internally is still sort of cooking. And if we know anything about Brent Venables, he's going to get his guys in there. Like, personnel will eventually get to the level that is expected in Norman. But from where I'm sitting, all the reasons why Oklahoma hires a guy like Brent Venables to be their head coach is still very much in play. Like, it's not the season you hoped to have from a wins and losses perspective, but I mean, you brought him there because great recruiter. Okay, that box is still checked. Still having a great recruiting class right now. You brought him there to add an edge and have culture. Okay, we saw it in the bowl game. We saw it throughout the year. Team had a lot of chances to just throw in the towel and guys to say, you know what, woe is me. I don't want to be a part of this. Didn't see that from the team. Finished really strong outside of the bowl game. So I think a lot of the things that you got married to Brent Venables for are still in play, but it's going to take some time for that to totally formulate. Because, Ty, you know this as well as anybody, the scheme that Brent Venables runs, they ask a lot of those defensive linemen, and there's not just freak show defensive linemen walking around every football program. Like, they have done a lot now, I think, on the recruiting trail to get guys to fit that scheme well. And we saw Adepoju Adewale, I believe it was last night, just making offensive linemen look silly rep after rep. So, I mean, when he gets thrown in, he's going to be a problem. And there's more guys that are, I would say, built in that mold, like the size and speed mold, if you will, kind of those just prototypical modern edge rushers they're going to get more of. So I guess, Ty, we're singing the same song here. Let it bake. Process the process. Trust it a little bit. Everything here is still in play. And it's definitely building the right direction from where I'm sitting, at least.
Yeah, and I hope my echo has helped a little bit now. But I think whether, you should be concerned or not, to echo kind of what they have said, it's all about buy-in for me. When you see Brent Venables and he's got, when he first got to Clemson, his first year, they had the 57th ranked from a defensive efficiency standpoint, 57th ranked defense. Then it went up to 17th. Then it went up to 2nd. And I don't think it left the top 5 for the rest of his tenure there. With that, he's going to bring the defense. He's obviously got the horses, but the buy-in is so important. He talked about in his press conference after the Florida State game to not coach to the scoreboard. And a lot of OU fans right now, they grew up worshiping at the altar of Bud, Barry, and Bob, right? They're not used to losing it all, and they think it's unacceptable. Of course it's unacceptable. Nobody's going to sit here and tell you that it's acceptable to have a losing season at Oklahoma. That's lying. But we all watched what happened to Lincoln Riley against Utah both times and against Tulane. That's what we're trying to get away from. The reliance on a superhero quarterback to try and save an abysmal defense. We're trying to get away from that because you can't win big like that. So we were validated in that based on the Tulane game. But Brent Venables says he's not teaching or not coaching to the scoreboard. You need to build the processes. And I think that's so important because you want to get going in the routine and your work and your strain and your culture every day to where you put your head down and work, and then you look up at the end of the season and all of a sudden you're in the national championship game. Like when you obsess with results to a certain point, then results are the only way that you'll measure your self-worth. And that's where I think this team is on the up and up. You see not only the recruiting class, but the transfers. We're talking about like every transfer we brought in is a 2-deep guy. Like every single one on a roster that's already got some talent to it. So you're looking at Trace Ford. I mean, he'll fight for a starting job, if not get it. You talk about Deshaun McCullough was maybe the best defensive player in the entire transfer portal. He signs on. You got Austin Stogner, who is your shoe-in star immediately and who provides a massive target in the middle for Dylan Gabriel. You talk about Jacob Lacey and Reggie Pearson. And these guys are all difference makers. Brent Venables is going big game hunting in the portal, and he's not done. Look for Ohio State and Clemson to possibly continue to add to Oklahoma's class. And again, the defense is going to look dramatically different in year 2 than it did year 1.
Yeah. And real quick before I round off your guys' thoughts, make sure, guys, if you're in the chat, you watch the video and you enjoy what we're talking about, just the content. Make sure you like the video. It's easy. Just click maybe 1 second. Just click it. That's all you gotta do. We're here. Make sure you get the word out. Share. Like we got big time stars on here like Ty Hayes and JD Pickell. Am I saying your last name right, JD?
I've been called everything in my day. Pickell is how you say it, but Pickle, bro, I'll respond to that too. So you can find me there. No worries.
So
That
look,
sounds like
I like
a
that.
Joe Dierte type situation. You got sick of getting called pickle, so you made it fancy. It's actually Pickell. Actually.
Well, a funny story. Whenever Jalen Waddell was drafted, I don't know if y'all remember, his family stood up, and whenever they announced his name, they were yelling, "It's Waddell!" And so apparently everybody's called him the wrong name forever, even Nick Saban. But it's apparently Jalen Waddell. But at this point, it's
Well,
Jalen Waddle.
then his Waddle touchdown celebration doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think he's just gone with it at this point. Yeah.
You gotta go with the brand.
Yep.
Wow, that is I had no idea on either of those, Waddell and Pickell. Okay, so JD Pickell is on here with us tonight. But no, make sure you guys like that or hit that like button. But thank you guys for your objective analysis. That's a reason why we try to bring other people other than just Trav and I on that aren't big time Oklahoma fans because if you paid attention at all on the Twitter sphere, and JD, you might not know this because I'm sure you don't just see a bunch of Oklahoma stuff. Travis and I are resident sunshine pumpers. That's what we get called because we try to be reasonable and positive and not act like the sky is falling every 3 seconds. And so, yes, was this season frustrating? Was it acceptable at the University of Oklahoma? No, we all know that. You don't got to say that. That's a base. But I think again, you're looking at a situation that was so different than anything we've ever seen. People don't leave the University of Oklahoma. That just doesn't happen. Lincoln Riley didn't. That didn't happen. Like Brian Kelly didn't just leave Notre Dame. That stuff had not happened before. Then you have the transfer portal, right? NIL, which has changed that. And we'll get to that here in just a second. That's our next topic that we're going towards. But all that to say, man, there was a lot that happened. Not to mention the slow decay of different pieces of the program, mainly the defense, right? And strength and conditioning as well that was happening at Oklahoma. And so you have Brent Venables bringing him in, and to the outside perspective, it's he's getting a 11-2, or 10-2, whatever we ended up being last year. I think 11-2 with the bowl win roster, and it's like that's not the same roster. We lost a ton of guys, especially on defense side of the ball, that went to the NFL. You had Pat Fields, who, obviously, while he's not an NFL player, he's a brilliant mind and played so many snaps at the University of Oklahoma. So you're losing a lot of guys on that defense. So you played a lot of young guys this year, and you're bringing in brand new systems. And JD, as you alluded to, Brent Venables' system is difficult to learn. It's not. You literally have Alex Grant, who, if we're talking about easy, that's over here. And then you have Brent Venables. It's almost polar opposites in terms of scheme and what they ask you to do. And so knowing that and seeing that, we have games where we're, last 4 games, 3 points apart each game. And I know everybody's going to say that's Scott Frost syndrome, but guys, this is the first year, right? Scott Frost did that in his 3rd year. He was close, So for me, if it's the same thing next year and then into his 3rd year, we're dealing with the same issues, then we can start to talk about being concerned. But after 1 year, especially considering everything that needed to be, kind of redone, revamped in certain ways, and with the recruiting that Brent Venables is doing, I think our best days are still going to be ahead of us. And obviously, we have yet to see what other big pickups we're going to have in the transfer portal, as Travis alluded to. Now, I did want to talk about the NIL 12-team playoff and everything going on in college football right now, because I know, JD, we got limited time, so I'll make sure we hit some of these things. But I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on just the state of college football as it is right now. Ty, I know we've talked about it on here plenty of times, what NIL is doing, what the transfer portal is doing, but also maybe encapsulate, the 12-team playoff and what that potentially could have, or not harm in doing, but what that could do to college football programs moving forward. Does it create more buy-in? Because if you make the playoff, are you going to see less opt-outs? Are you going to see people that want to stay longer? or are you going to see the same type of stuff and people flip flopping depending on how much money they're going to get? So let's start with JD, and then we'll go around. Trav, you'll go next, and then Ty.
Sure. Yeah, I think the 12-team playoff is super fascinating because we can all call a spade here. Like, this move was for TV money, right? Like, we just tripled the field and we're tripling our dollars and everybody's getting paid. I am maybe in the minority in that I still think you're going to see some of these teams. It might not be for the first year or the second year. Like, it might take 3 to 4 years before we see this. I think we're still going to see guys eventually opt out. Like, if I'm the 12th team in and I think I have a pretty good shot at playing in the NFL for a long time and a first round pick, like, I think that's eventually going to happen. I don't know when, but I just think it eventually will. In regards to buy-in, though, I think you will see a lot of these programs have meaningful games late in the year. It won't be the games that we're used to seeing. Like, Ohio State, Michigan will be for seeding. What else? We could see, if A&M gets together, could see A&M, LSU for seeding. But some of these other games that maybe we didn't have on our radar originally on rivalry weekend, we'll see those games matter a little bit more. But I think what it comes down to on the recruiting trail, we keep pitching this narrative of it's going to create parity because more kids will have a chance to play for national titles, and that's a good thing. And I think to some extent that's involved with these kids recruiting, but I still go back to the same sentiment of I think getting developed is first and foremost on a lot of these kids' minds. And whether I make the 12-team playoff or not, that's great, but did I get the most out of my development to where I can make that real money in the NFL? Now, a lot of times development and winning go hand in hand, so maybe that's kind of a moot point, but that's where I fall in. I don't think it's going to change the buy-in a ton, but I think it will kind of change the way that we watch November football.
Right. I couldn't agree more on that. I think parity is a lie, to be honest. It is a lie. It mainly goes with coaching, really. I mean, you get a guy like Saban, and there's your parity right there. You get a guy like Urban Meyer, there's your parity right there. You get a Kirby Smart. You get these guys that get hooked up with programs that naturally bring in talent, but have developed well, have the money to compete, everything like that, and you're going to do well. That's why these coaches are making such ungodly figures, right? That's how this all works. So, chasing parity is silly because that's not what people want, right? I mean, so many people, especially our age, their greatest basketball memories maybe were growing up watching Jordan. Well, that's not parity. Maybe our parents, they like the Showtime Lakers. Well, that's not parity. I mean, nobody's wanting the Dallas Mavericks to beat the Heat all the time because it's not a good story. They don't like it. People like dynasties. They like the Patriots run. They like all these different things. They like the Chiefs. They like the Chiefs with Mahomes. It's kind of a nice story here and there, but let's be honest, parity is vastly overrated. And from just a content standpoint overall, right? And with that, if NIL was supposed to provide parity, remember? Have you looked at the recruiting rankings lately? It's the same as they were a decade ago. So I don't know where your parity is there. We can't keep on changing the sport to try and find parity. You can't go, 12-team playoff. Okay. Well, now you guarantee that Alabama and Ohio State and likely Georgia will always be in the playoff. Always. So now you've got the teams that may not have made it. Now Alabama makes it. TCU that, is having an incredible season. Yeah, sure. They would make a 12-team playoff. But now, all right, cool. You got Bama in the first round, or you've got, whoever. You got LSU in the first round. You got USC in the first round. And then you've got to play another game. And that's the thing. I like the expanded playoff simply because, I'll put it this way. I don't like the expanded playoff. If I have to like something about the expanded playoff, it's that there will be games played on home campuses. That's what I like.
Love that.
Because I foam at the mouth when I think about Lincoln Riley having to lead the USC Trojans into Norman, Oklahoma to play the Sooners. Nothing excites me more with the future of this, right? Because Oklahoma in the SEC, if you don't win it, which obviously early on, it's a tall task, you could end up in that 5 to 8 range. That 5 to 8 is going to play host. So, yeah, I think it could be very interesting. I think the perfect situation would have been to go 1 through 8, have your automatic qualifiers for those of you that like those things, to have your 5 Power 5 conferences while they're still Power 5 conferences, have 2 automatic or 2 at large bids, and then have your highest ranked P5, because your P5 now you can't complain if you're UCF, or you can't complain if you're Coastal Carolina and say you never got a fair shot. No, you can get in, but you might not want to get in. You know what I mean? So your 2 at large can go to whoever loses the SEC championship, whoever loses the Big Ten championship, however you want to do that, right? You can still get Ohio State and Michigan in. You can still get Alabama, Georgia in, however you want to do it. But with that, 8 teams, but you put the top seeds at home, 1 through 4 plays on campus, and then you go right into your 14 playoff after that, after you play the eliminations. Then you can rotate your peach and your orange and, however you want to do it. But I think that's how it would have been. But we have to stop chasing the idea of parity. Nobody's choosing to go to, Michigan State over Alabama simply because they might go to the playoff. They might like a position coach better. They might like a coach that can get them to the NFL better. They might like East Lansing better. They might like this, that, or the other. But at the end of the day, they're not signing that national letter of intent because they might make a playoff as a 10 seed instead of, just go to, the Rose Bowl or whatever.
Yeah, I agree, Travis. I think you and I have talked about this. You know how I feel about it. I pretty much will echo a lot of your sentiments, JD. I think you and I have talked about this as well. And one thing I thought was super interesting, JD, you said was your point about development, because I completely agree. At the end of this, even when speaking about NIL pales in comparison to what the money the NFL provides. And I think one thing we get lost inside of is people saying, oh, well, a guy like Bryce Young probably cleared over $1 million this year. I don't know that. But considering Saban said he'd already made over $1 million before he ever took a starting snap at Alabama, I think it's reasonable to assume that after winning the Heisman, he was clearing $1 million this year. But okay, let's say he makes $1 million next year. He's almost going to be guaranteed a $36, $38, $39 million contract the way these guys are negotiating. And he's still eligible for NIL money in the NFL with no holds bar. He doesn't have the NCAA policing him. He can do whatever he wants to profit off of his name, image, and likeness. There is no holds bar. So that's going to also exponentially increase. So I completely agree. Development is going to be king. And I love what you said when you talked about the playoffs and how now that winning is changing, it might be a moot point, but I don't think it is a moot point, man. I think you're 100% on brand, because even though more teams will make the playoffs, that doesn't necessarily mean more teams are going to be playing winning brand of football, because we've just modified our expectations of what is a playoff team. But the cream will still rise to the crop. And those are the teams that the development is going to be king. So I think you were right on brand, man. I don't think that is a moot point. I think you're 100% right. In terms of a 12-team playoff, I've always said this. I believe college football is the best sport in the world. Why? Because it embodies meritocracy. The belief that if you go out there and handle your business, and if you are the best, it will show. I don't understand why we're trying to make college football more like the other sports that we don't like as much as college football, right? That's been always my biggest confusion with expanding the playoffs. Like, why are we trying to make college football more like the brands of sports we don't care for as much? Will it still be great? Absolutely. Will I complain about more football? No. And I love that they're going to be home games, but inevitably the regular season means something. I, as an Alabama fan, would have loved for the Crimson Tide to make the playoffs. We saw what Alabama looks like when they played Kansas State at full strength. And you want to know what's scary about that? The first quarter, Kansas State was running it up on Alabama. The second and third quarter, Bama crushed them, and Bryce Young was out in the fourth quarter. So off of 2 quarters of full strength work, we saw what a full strength Bama team looks like. If this is the 12-team playoffs, TCU's season means nothing because Alabama is right there. Now, maybe TCU wins out. Maybe. But now the level of importance on their season is exponentially diminished because of the implications and the way we've modified our expectations of winning. And the last thing I'll say here, I have to say this every time we bring up NIL because it's my largest frustrations with NIL. It's that I worry about bad faith actors in the space taking advantage of these kids because college football is $1 billion industry. And I always liken this back to when NIL was passed because timing is key, guys. It is. NCAA versus Alston was decided in early June. 10 days later, all of a sudden, the NCAA figured out how to do NIL. Now, for those of you not aware of what NCAA versus Alston is, it was a case where the Supreme Court took a look at the structure of the antitrust laws within the NCAA. And Justice Kavanaugh wrote that nowhere else in America can businesses get away with agreeing not to pay their workers a fair market rate on the theory that their product is defined by not paying their workers a fair market rate. And under ordinary principles of antitrust law, it is not evident why college sports should be any different. 10 days later, all of a sudden, they figure out NIL. Here's the kicker with it, though. They didn't implement it with equal values, meaning states like Florida and states like Alabama could not do the same things as states like Texas because the state legislatures in those states were proactive. They got ahead of the curve and passed NIL legislation. Any states that did that were hurt. So this is a big problem with NIL, that we don't have an equal playing ground because the NCAA did not implement an equal playing ground. They implemented the Wild West simply so that they could get the Supreme Court off their back. What the Supreme Court was looking at actually didn't have to do with the entirety of the NCAA structure, but Justice Kavanaugh put a painting on their back that was a target, and he let it be known, if you challenge their antitrust law, we will listen. And all of a sudden, the NCAA is scared, and they have to do something, so we have NIL. Do I agree that the players should be paid? Absolutely. There's no question about that. But I think we need to have provisions and protections for these players to make sure that it's done correctly and that they're protected from predatory people in the space.
Yeah. No, I think that those are all great points. And Ty, I think that that monologue about the specifics of the NIL deals in different states was great. It's an amazing point, to be honest, because we're talking about parity and NIL or the 12-team playoff, and that specifically is just going to lead to, as Nick Saban so well said in his press conference when talking about
Do you want
NIL,
this?
Is that what you want? Do you want that smoke for real? Yeah, no, I completely agree. Now, I and Trav knows this. There's probably one point that Travis and I probably agree on 95% of stuff. I love the idea of a 12-team playoff. However, I do think everything that you guys have said is completely valid. I do wonder, right, with TCU getting a national championship game this year, I think to the average college fan, that probably has them tasting the 12-team playoff more because they're like, man, a team like TCU can do it. Not, most college football probably didn't watch TCU all year. Yeah, did they struggle in some games? Sure, but did they know they were as physical as they are? Did they know Max Duggan could sling it? Like things like that the average college football fan maybe they don't watch the tape. And obviously we would know more because all four of us do that ad nauseum. But obviously Trav and I watched a lot of Big 12 football and get to see TCU on a regular basis as well. So yeah, we know they're good. But even then, I think what it does is okay, TCU is a smaller school to the average mind. Now that they have gotten over that proverbial hump in the semifinal game, and who knows, they end up winning the Natty. Man, 12-team playoff, maybe an 11 seed could win it, maybe a 10 seed could win it. Maybe we could have a Cinderella story like, George Mason from basketball. It's just I'm not sure that that's going to be a consistent thing because college football, especially at the FBS level, is so much different. Not even the FBS level, just in general, right? I mean, you look at North Dakota State, right? At the FCS level, they kill it every single year, right? The same teams that are good and have championship culture are going to be there all the time. And so, yeah, I do wonder what it looks like. I love personally thinking, though, as Trav said, USC at Oklahoma, or even, a Clemson going to Georgia or something like that, right? In December, just think of the towns, what it's going to do. I think that part of it is amazing. But I do see your guys' point completely on what you said as far as that. Did anybody else have any counterpoints or anything else they wanted to speak on?
The only thing that I would add is I totally see what you're saying about TCU. Like, hey, if they're in as a 12 seed, maybe they make some noise, and maybe they do open the floodgates to some of these other programs to say, hey, if we get the right matchup, we have a chance to make some noise. I think the one thing that I would add is in regards to TCU being in the playoff, kind of Ty's point, like the meritocracy of you handle your business and you get in. Because I think for the longest time, this is arguments I've heard elsewhere, is, hey, the little guys, the less resourced, the smaller schools, the Cincinnatis, the TCUs, like the argument is always like, well, how are they supposed to compete with big brands, the schools that are the haves, if you will? Well, now we're seeing TCU play their schedule, lose their conference championship game, get a little help, mind you. They got some help from outside sources or outside variables that fell their way, but it's kind of however you want to see it. Either it helps the 14 playoff argument or it helps the 12 team playoff argument. So, I'm a little bit biased leaning towards the 4 team. Like Ty said, when we get more ball, we're all consuming it. It's good for all of our businesses. We're going to be locked in for a longer period of time. It'll be great, but to yell at a cloud a little bit longer, TCU getting in, it's kind of like, well, they handled their business and they have 12,000 undergrad and they missed a bowl game last year. So it is what it is.
Yeah, that's kind of my last point on it. Like with TCU specifically, now we've had a G5 school get in Cincinnati. Now, I mean, obviously not G5 anymore, but they were when they got in. And now you got TCU in, who was unranked to start the year, missed a bowl last year. Like, what are these barriers that everybody thinks exist to get in? Like, that's what frustrates me is, well, every team should have a chance. Okay, well, we saw a P5 team get in and an unranked team just climb through. Like, take care of your games and you have a chance to win a national title. Like, that's where the little guy just doesn't have a shot. The little guy doesn't have a shot because the little guy won't win his games. If the little guy wins his games, he will get in. And, like Nick Saban, he brought up in his his kind of last press conference before the playoff, he said, look, if we were, if Vegas essentially made odds, if they, handicap the game, who would be favored to win? Well, you were favored to, beat Texas handily, and you didn't beat Texas handily. You were favored to beat Texas A&M handily. That came down to the last play. You were favored to beat Tennessee. You didn't beat Tennessee. And it's like, you get what I'm saying. You keep going down the list, and it's like, you play the games for a reason. The games have to matter. So that's why, to Ty's chagrin, Alabama gets left out, TCU gets in, but there's a chance. Like, you have a chance. And so I don't get what the barriers are to a national championship now, because any arguments that you have that certain teams can't make it have been completely debunked in back-to-back years.
Yeah. I mean, and look, to your point, Bama's not in because they lost 2 games. As simple as it is, right? And when we talk about expanding the playoffs, now you're talking about an Alabama team that lost 2 games that's getting hot. And I think, I forget who said it, but I think they're probably right. I think if you asked Kirby Smart, hey, do you want to see Alabama in the playoffs? I'm sure Kirby Smart feels very confident in Georgia. And I'm sure he'd feel confident in Georgia's ability to beat Alabama. But I'm sure he'd also, if he was being honest, say, yeah, I'd prefer not to see Nick Saban standing across from me with Bryce Young, Will Anderson, and that team. So the 4-team playoff worked this year. So, and it worked last year. Cincinnati got in, TCU got in. If you handle your business, you're in. It's that simple.
Yeah. No, I mean, you guys are right, and I do definitely see that point. Just like
I have one thing to say though. Hank asked earlier if Nick Saban had ever beat Urban Meyer. 2009, Alabama ended the Florida reign in the SEC. It was almost the passing of the torch from Urban to Nick Saban in the SEC. So yeah, that was a while ago, Hank, but 2009.
Interesting. Let's go ahead and move on to the national championship game. TCU, Georgia. Obviously, the semifinals were amazing, right? Ohio State, Georgia, TCU, Michigan. I am interested in what everybody thinks the keys are going to be. Obviously, we could sit here and say Georgia's going to smash TCU. A lot of people probably thought Michigan was going to do the same, but from an objective analysis, I know that's why a lot of these people are all 100, 10 plus people that are in here right now. Make sure you hit that like button. That are in here right now. They want to hear what you guys have to think about TCU, and do they have a chance at all, or is it just Georgia's gonna smash them? So should we even tune in? Ty, I'll start with you. Then we'll go Trav and then JD.
100% you should tune in. You just saw TCU's 3-3-5 smash a power running scheme, which, by the way, guys, theoretically speaking, should not work, at least as efficiently as it did. It should not work the way it did. And you saw guys playing hard nose inspired football. In terms of this game, I say this all the time. My dad was big into boxing, so one of my other love in sports is combat sports, whether that's boxing, UFC. Like, if I'm not watching football, I'm probably watching those. Styles make matchups, and this is another example. Whenever we were talking about Georgia, Ohio State, I kept saying stylistically, this is going to be interesting because the teams that have tested Georgia can stretch the field. TCU's got some really good wide receivers. Quentin Johnson, Darius Davis, and Max Duggan will sling it. He is not scared to test your cornerbacks. Georgia's going to be playing a lot of man. We know this. We know what Kirby Smart likes to do. That's going to be a very difficult defense to move the ball on. But TCU stylistically has the ability to do the things that have allowed opposing offenses to find success against Georgia. Now, the hard part is, how are you going to stop a guy like Jalen Carter for 4 quarters? JD, you've seen the clip. I probably don't have to tell you. I love the clip of him against LSU where he straight up threw the tackle out the club and then made the play. And I was sitting there thinking, how, if the LSU offensive line can't stop this cat, what are you supposed to do? And it's crazy because they just lost a dude that was a top 3 pick last year. And Jalen Carter looks every bit of. So we know what Georgia is. They're the Death Star. They're the Sith, right? They're the Republic. But TCU has got an interesting recipe for challenging Georgia because of the receivers they have. Georgia is so tough, and I go back to those tight ends. Their tight end room makes them such a tough offense to stop, and Todd Monken does a phenomenal job of dialing it up, keeping the plays balanced. And Stetson, you can like him, you can dislike him, but you got to respect what the guy does. I mean, he's winning ball games. That's all you can ask him to do. He's making the plays when they need to be made. So I can't wait to watch this. I think you absolutely need to tune in. There's no question about it. This is going to be a fun game, a really fun game.
Yeah, and with this game, I think we've suffered from, and Tyler, you're very familiar with Bama fatigue. I think this year we've suffered with a slight bit of Georgia fatigue. I know everybody's so quick to crown Tennessee right after they beat Alabama. Oh, Tennessee, man, they're really the best team in the country. People were comparing them to 2019 LSU. Oh, best team in the country. Oh, well, we got to watch for, Ohio State. Oh, maybe Michigan's the best team in the country. How about, look, Georgia's undefeated. They won the national championship last year. They got all the talent in the world, most talented team in the country that's at least, still in the playoff perhaps. Yeah, they got tested against Ohio State. Ohio State's got great skill positions. They can score with a lot of people. But I just don't think TCU has the horses, to be honest. Yeah, they went against Michigan's offensive line that is award-winning at many levels and did what they did with them. But, Michigan, against Ohio State, a lot of people did some box score watching instead of actually watching the game. And, they sell it on the run. All of a sudden, Michigan's got guys running wide open down the field as Ohio State safeties keep on tripping over each other or corners keep falling out. It was embarrassing showing from Ohio State. But I think Georgia's got the horses that TCU, as great of a story as they are and as good of a team as they are, they can't compete with necessarily. Duggan will let it fly, but he was really ineffective, especially early against Michigan. with those downfield throws that Michigan was really asking him to make. But so I don't know if he can put it together for 4 quarters on those downfield throws with a guy like Jalen Carter in his grill. But I personally would love to see TCU win because Oklahoma goes up against against Georgia for recruits a lot more than they go up for TCU, and I don't like when teams like Georgia or Clemson or somebody like that win a title because they creep ever closer to Oklahoma historically. So, TCU, get it done, baby. I need it.
It really feels like TCU's kind of America's team because I think you hit it on the head. Everyone's getting tired of, I think you said the Bama fatigue is setting in, maybe Georgia fatigue, which is a little bit funny because they only have one title to their name in the last 40 years. But I think just stylistically, there's the feeling of we want a more exciting champion. And Georgia, no knock on Georgia for the way they win games, but they're pretty similar to those old Alabama teams where you have a quarterback who can hand the ball off to his freakish running back, and there's 2 more freakish running backs behind him. They're going to dominate the trenches. You have a walk-on quarter. You know what I mean? Just optically, I think we want something a little more exciting, which is why we all wanted, Tennessee and scoring however many points a game, and maybe TCU and Ohio State and all these other teams. We like that entertainment value, I think. But in terms of keys to the game, I think y'all had a lot of spot-on points. I think Max Duggan and his ability to ad-lib will be really critical because we saw C.J. Stroud kind of break contain a couple of times and do the scramble drill, and Georgia's got some dogs on the back end. No pun intended, they got some dudes that are going to play a long time on Sundays. But to your point, Ty, they got some really good receivers at TCU, and it's going to be hard enough to cover them in man coverage, which they'll play a lot, for 3 seconds, 4 seconds, like a typical football play. If it turns into a scramble drill and you got 7 seconds for Tay Barber to get open or Quentin Johnston to get open, that's going to make things really difficult for Georgia. Now, if they can get home, if Smile Monday can get home, or Jamon Dumas-Johnson, or like you said, your boy Jalen Carter just throwing homies out the club and making plays, that could be a situation where, all right, Georgia kind of gets the snowball thing going. I also think for Georgia offensively, those early downs, that's going to be really critical. I mean, TCU got home against Michigan 4 different times. Did they sack J.J. McCarthy? Some of that's maybe self-inflicted for Michigan and them getting behind the sticks. But I think if Georgia can live in 2nd and 6 and 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, that's going to change the entire game. Because we've seen this from Georgia. I think what makes them so different this year from last year is, to your point, Ty, they can fight different styles. We can see them go and have to score 42 to beat Ohio State, or they can go on the road in the rain and score 16-6 against Kentucky, and they can win that way too. So if it becomes a boxing match like we saw against Ohio State, or it becomes, let's say, jiu-jitsu like it was against Kentucky, they're able to play both styles. But if they're able to be multiple and keep you guessing defensively if you're TCU, then I think you're a little bit more off balance. And when Georgia can dictate their tempo to you, could be a long afternoon. I'm going to pick Georgia to win. I do think that 13.5, that 12.5, whatever it is now, I think that's far too much. I think we got to give TCU some more respect. I think Vegas is just daring us to take Georgia with the points, which is fair. I mean, they got a lot of towers in Vegas for a reason. But that's my ultimate feel in the game. And, boys, I'm fired up. We're all going to be locked in. And to your question, JP, everybody else should be as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And honestly, I think one of the big things for me is that with college football being where it is right now, on the cusp of, 12-team playoff, people are going to watch, are they not? I think it's imperative we watch, a national championship game, regardless of what we feel the outcome is going to be or not. But with that being said, JD, I know you got a roll, man. Man, I appreciate you so much for being on here. Means a lot, and you are for real always welcome back anytime, brother.
Appreciate it, man. Man, y'all are all phenomenal, all goats in this space, like I said, and would love to come on another time soon, and we'll do it again. And the beautiful thing that is spring football will be here soon enough. We'll get there, but appreciate y'all. Enjoy the game, and we'll do this again real soon.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Absolutely,
boys.
man.
All right. That was JD Pickell. Loved having him on. Like I said, it's another guy that similar to Ty, and they actually know each other very well. off camera. They're both great guys in this space. So we always want to do that, as you guys know, and as I said last week, and as I said on Twitter, the off season for the JP and Trav show, we don't just sit on our hands; we light it up. Okay, we're trying to get more and more great content out here for y'all. We can't just sit on our hands and say, "Hey, here's what we have this week," because we don't have things to talk about all the time. Obviously we have the transfer portal and different things like that, but we don't have the meat of the season like we normally do. And so we try to turn up the heat and get great people in here for you, like Ty, like a JD. So stay with us. That's all I'll say. Continuing though, and one point I did want to make, and I've seen people out here talking about this 3-3-5 defense, right? That John Heacock has done, and that obviously Gary Patterson was more 4-2-5, but we've seen college football shift to this 3-3-5, especially in the Big 12. Um, and it is a defense where if you have a big guy in the middle, and if you have guys that are willing to lay their bodies on the line in the back end, you can make it work. And that's why, like, I think I've gotten so frustrated, and Trav, I think, will agree with me on this. Through the year, we had so many people bring up to, Brent Venables, oh, four down lineman, four down lineman, four down lineman, and all this. And I get it. Like, maybe it's because they felt like we didn't have the personnel, and they felt like, he was being disingenuous for what he did have, even though we know that's where he kind of wants to go. But for me, I I always said, why are we not looking at the players on the field that need to be making the plays rather than the scheme that we know works with a guy who's been a top defensive coordinator for I don't know how long, right? With 8 years out of 10 having top defenses. And I know Ty, and I'll give you a second here. I know that you're more on the tilt of feeling like if you have this, you should do this and switching. But what my ultimate point is that it's not that the 3-3-5 defense doesn't work, and that's what a lot of OU fans had said is that I don't like three man. You can run it so easily against it, but knowing that the last couple of years we've gone up against a Baylor and even a TCU, but specifically a Baylor, right? When Phil Snow was there with Matt Rule, excuse me. When Phil Snow was there with Matt Rule, they were one of the hardest hitting teams that we saw, right? And you have this thing in the Big 12 where people are like, oh, they're soft, or oh, they're not physical, and that's not true of every team. The Big 12 can be very physical, even with defenses like that. Even though you don't have four down linemen all the time or three linebackers or whatnot, it just depends on if you have the guys that are going to be willing to do it. And TCU showed that on last week, last Thursday, was it Saturday? Excuse me, I'm getting all my days jumbled up. Last Saturday, I think they showed that against Michigan. Yeah, did they give up some points? Sure, but that's just because you have teams that are playing good ball. Same with Ohio State and Georgia. It's not a lack of like the defense has sucked. Like, no, man, they got dudes. They got Marvin Harrison Jr. at Ohio State. Like, Georgia has dogs on the back end, sure, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be probably a top 10 pick in the draft next year. He probably could be this year, realistically. But anyways, before I get too much on a tangent, Tyler, what's your response, man?
Yeah, so I don't disagree, right? Like obviously the 3-3-5 can work. My thing is it works if you have the personnel. And we were talking about this the other day, and I likened it to a teacher, right? So if you knew that the SAT test was going to change next year, you wouldn't teach your students the test that's coming next year this year, because you'd want to put your students in a position to succeed this year. And I'm not saying that Brent Venables was doing that, but to people that ask like, well, why would you move away from the 3-3-5 if that's what you want to do long term if it's not working in the short term? Because you still got to put your guys in a position to succeed. But one thing we did see though is over the season as it progressed, as they adapted to the defense. I mean, we saw this defense completely change in the way that they were attacking the run, specifically at this Florida State game.
Yeah.
That's what Florida State was doing, and we started to see where the areas of the 3-3-5 come in and make it so successful. Here's one thing I'll say. Alabama this year, right? Like when we look at what happened in the bowl game, you want to know one of the reasons I think they were so successful against Kansas State? Bama all season long has been running a 2-4-5. 2 down linemen, 4 linebackers, 5 defensive backs. Because 2 of the guys on the line of scrimmage, Will Anderson and Dallas Turner, Bama drops them into coverage at around a 20 to 30% clip. So they're in coverage a lot more than people think. There's 4 linebackers on the field. This Bama team wasn't the best against the run consistently. I mean, Auburn put up 300 yards against them because they don't have a Quinnen Williams in the middle. They don't have an Allen. They don't have a Deron Payne. But against Kansas State, they went to a more 3-3-5 oriented defense with either having Will, Dallas, or Chris Braswell, but 3 down linemen as opposed to 2. And it was much more conducive to success because we just didn't have the personnel to be able to run what Pete Golding really wanted to run, the 2-4-5. We just knew against Kansas State, it's not going to be as conducive to success. But no, I don't disagree at all. The 3-3-5 with Brent Venables, it is going to be successful. Travis, you pointed it out earlier, and it's so true. You look at what he did with Clemson, the way he improved that defense every single year. You look at the improvement that we saw during the course of the year. There's no question that Brent Venables is going to have this defense looking right. And I would bet sooner rather than later. And the 3-3-5 is going to be very fun to watch with him at the helm of it.
Trav, you got anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, defensive improvements. If there's a guy walking the earth that I'm not worried about being able to coach defense, it's Brent Venables. I mean, over the last 2 decades, he's proven that. And, again, look for more portal help, especially along that interior defensive line. Obviously, we had Devon Sears in town today on his visit. He is the 6'3", 290 defensive tackle from Texas State. He is named his top 3. He is visiting Oklahoma first. And then the plan is that he will
Getting a little choppy.
I believe you got me? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
You're back
good.
now.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, middle of nowhere, Oklahoma out here. Sorry. That's why I'm keeping my camera off, so hopefully it helps the connection. But anyways, I think we're not done with the portal. I think the year-long moratorium has reached its conclusion for when it comes to taking Clemson players. So I do think we have at minimum 1 defensive lineman from there. That's just my opinion. That's not anything you need to go out and throw out on Twitter or anything like that. But yeah, I think Brent Venables knows what he's doing. And I also think when you're to the point of trying to adapt your scheme to fit your personnel when you're a new coach, you have to choose who you do a disservice to a certain extent, right? So the older guys that are on their way out that won't be here next year to see the defensive scheme come to fruition in its better form, you might be doing those guys a disservice, but do you want to do a disservice to them, or do you want to do a disservice to all the young guys that will be here over the next few years, and you don't want to teach them 2 different schemes, or you don't want to teach them, develop into 2 different schemes? I'm all for, hey, look, older guys, let's see if you can adapt. You've got more football experience. You're bigger, faster, stronger. Let's see what happens. But I'm all for, not dumbing down your processes. While like in one hand you can't, or out one side of your mouth you can't dumb down the process, and out the other side of your mouth say best is the standard. You need to strain. You need to work harder. Like you can't do both things. So it's quite the balancing act. There's no doubt. At times, I'm betting Brent Venables wish he could have another crack at it, but it's simply not the case. You got to move forward, and I think this defense looks a lot different next year.
Oh, undoubtedly. With the pieces that we added in the portal, as well as the class we have coming in, and some of the guys we have coming back, frankly, that's just going to have another year under their belt in this defense. And with the same coaches, right, from year to year that obviously they didn't have at this time, or they did at this time last year, but they were just getting installed, at this point. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm thinking that, like you guys said, Brent Venables knows how to coach defense. We know this. Um, Jeff Lebby is, one of the better offensive coordinators in the nation. As even though people, around Norman, if you talk to some of them, they think he don't know what he's doing all the time. I get that, he's not above criticism. That's not what I'm saying. But some of the way y'all talk about him, man, I'm just saying there's other programs, okay, elite programs that will want the man. Okay, so let's be grateful for what we have. And yeah, I'm looking forward to next year, man. Definitely. Before we get out of here, we'll answer a couple of questions. Ty, I always, man, just because the same way you do for me when I come on your show, I'm gonna give you the floor for a second just to talk about Bama and to talk about how you thought about your season and what you think about Alabama going into next year. Obviously, we've seen that they're signing one of the craziest classes ever, but it feels like they do that every year. So
Yeah, so it's a little bit wild. This class they have when you dive into the numbers, they have one 3-star, and it's a kicker. And it's the number 3 kicker in the nation, and
that's
kickers are
crazy.
always 3-stars, guys. They have 2 guys that rank outside of the top 300 players in the nation out of 25 eligible, because obviously the other one is a kicker. 2 of the guys are the number 1 and number 2 JUCO players in the nation, Malik Benson and then Justin Jefferson. This class is going to be wild. Caleb Downs, I think, was the crown jewel of it, in my opinion. I think he's underrated as the number 6 player in the nation, number 1 safety in the nation. This kid he's got so much ability. Great safety class, by the way. Peyton Bowen is a top 15 player, unbelievable player. Caleb Downs. And then you look at Tony Mitchell, Makari Vickers. I mean, this safety class, guys, truly, this recruiting class top to bottom. Because then we start talking about the edge position. I mean, we know what PJ did at this All-American game. Absolutely showed out. I don't know if y'all have seen the clips of Keon Keeley and what he's been doing to kids out here, and it's a little bit scary. He's just picking them up and bull rushing them. Very excited about that. Multiple 5-stars, and they're still going after Kermani McLean. Now, whether or not I think it happens, I think it's a massive long shot, but it is interesting to note that for multiple days now, Richard Young has been saying there's an announcement coming on the 15th, and another guy will be coming onto this class. And then Kermani McLean says he's announcing on the 15th.
That would be
So
crazy.
whether they do it or not, like I said, I think it's a massive long shot. I don't think it's likely. But at the end of the day, it's crazy to think this is, statistically speaking, the best recruiting class Nick Saban has ever signed at Alabama. Now, we need to see what happens when they get on campus, but this is going to be a great class. I think everybody's question is going to be what happens with the quarterback position. Milrose got a lot of ability, but it's going to be dependent on scheme. So I'm interested to see what happens with the offensive coordinator. There's been names there's been names talked about. I'm interested to see who it ultimately is, but I think we also need to remember there's a former 5-star on that roster, Ty Simpson, who was a 5-star last cycle, true freshman this year. So it's going to be super interesting to see, man. It's definitely going to be a big turnover when you look at some of the players they lost. I mean, you're not going to replace Bryce Young. You're not going to replace Will Anderson. You're just not. You can recruit great guys. And I mean, I've always said like the edge position, which Will Anderson is leaving. I think Alabama has the most stacked room in the nation, and it's the edge room. Will Anderson is a 5-star, number 1 in his position. Keon Keeley, 5-star, number 1 in his position. Chris Braswell, number 2 in his class, 5-star. Dallas Turner, 5-star. Jeremiah Alexander, and Jaheed Campbell. So there's 7 5-stars as edge rushers on Alabama right now. So it's just, and Quay Rosa. So 8 5-stars, actually. And that's not counting Drew Sanders, who transferred out. That room is unbelievable, and I'm really excited to see what they do. They're actually implementing a cheetah package to get 3 edge rushers on the field at the same time. So that's going to be fun.
That's nuts. The rich just get richer.
It is wild. It is
already
wild. Like
why
Nick
you want
Saban
to-
said, y'all want this?
That's what he said. He wasn't playing. Greatest college football player of all time. So, there it is. Hey, let's answer a couple questions, then we'll get out of here. Now we're close to an hour. Trav, I'll let you start with this one because I think I know your answer. Well, I don't know it actually because it'll depend on what happens with our current quarterback. And then Ty, I'll let you answer your thoughts on this. Does Jackson
Um,
play QB next year?
I will say I hope not, because that means that Dylan Gabriel is playing well and he stays healthy. I will hedge a bit, and I will say I do think he plays a little bit, either by virtue of garbage time or by virtue of Dylan Gabriel being hurt, because unfortunately, Dylan Gabriel has not made it through an entire season healthy in some time now. I think as we see what's happening with Tua, as we see what's happening all over the NFL, really, people are going to be continuing to take these injuries more and more seriously and pull you out of games if need be. So I think due to the kind of the, I don't know, nature of the sport, the conversations and buzz around the sport, I think Jackson Arnold will play. But I also think it's probably a bad thing if he plays a bunch. He has said he wants to come to Oklahoma, he wants to compete, but he wants to learn under a guy that's been in the system for a long time. I don't think it's a situation where Jackson beats out Dylan Gabriel in the preseason.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with everything Travis said. He hit the nail on the head. Just to quickly piggyback off of this, Dylan Gabriel knows the system. He's worked with Jeff Lebby before, right? He knows the expectations, and then he worked with him this year. And I am always of the mindset you probably want your true freshman quarterback to come in and redshirt. That's probably your best case scenario. Guys, the jump from high school to college is ridiculous. I mean, it might as well, we might as well call one of them something totally different than football and just refer to college football as football. Because I've said this before, in high school football, you could have Caden Proctor, the number one tackle in the nation or number two tackle in the nation, depending on where you look, and his high school film could be him blocking me. Well, that's not indicative of how talented he is if he just throws me to the ground, right? Like that's when he gets to college, he's going to be facing someone who's 6'6", right?
Yes.
Totally different ball game. I think in a perfect world, you want Jackson Arnold to redshirt, but now here's the flip side of this, guys, because I do have to give credit where it's due. And you, JP, I've been on this train for a long time. This kid is different. He's talented. He's very talented. I live in Denton, so I've gotten to watch him play live multiple times. He's different. I mean, the way he layers throws, his understanding of how to layer throws, his understanding of the short to intermediate game, which I know bores a lot of people, but that's how games are won. You have a great understanding of the short to intermediate, which allows you to capitalize off of the big shots. And he can do it all. I thought he was going to be a 5-star when he committed to Oklahoma. And now he's a top 10 player in the nation, pretty much everywhere you look.
Yep.
And deservedly so. But I do completely agree with Travis. In a perfect world, he redshirts. He comes in garbage time, learns. You get those 4 games not to burn your red shirt. Gabriel goes to the NFL. In comes Jackson Arnold. You sail off into the sunset.
Travis, are you sold that DJ is back though?
Yes.
Okay. Good to know.
I think they're waiting to make an announcement out of it, but I don't think he leaves because I don't think he's transferring anywhere, and I don't think it's in his best interest to go pro this year. Here's the thing, and I know that, it's like Alabama deals with coordinators. Like, the turnover at Oklahoma, has been insane. Baker was the last one to start and finish 2 seasons in a row. That was a long time ago.
That's
wild. He's been on 10. He's been on 10 NFL teams since then.
That's true. Yeah, facts.
So, I mean, when you go 18 Baker, 19 Kyler, 20 Jalen, 21 Spencer, or I got that screwed up, but y'all get me. 17 Baker, 18 Kyler, 19 Jalen, 20 Spencer, 21 Spencer to Caleb. 22 DG. It's like, God, just having a bit of continuity would be nice. I mean, think
Yeah.
about Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims had Simmons, then Gundy, then Washington as his wide receivers coach, Lincoln Riley, then Brent Venables as his head coach, Lincoln Riley, then Jeff Levy as his play caller, and then Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams, and now Dylan Gabriel as his quarterback. How on earth are you expected to succeed? We talk about it with Baker all the time. You got 7 head coaches in 5 years. Well, how is it at your position? You have 3 different position coaches, then 3 different quarterbacks, 2 different head coaches, 2 different play callers, and people expect that to be successful.
Yeah.
Like, the thing about Oklahoma State's defense under Jim Knowles last year, they had a bunch of 25-year-olds running around out there that have been in the system for 5 years. And, yeah, of course they were good. They've been playing together and hearing the same message in the same voice with the same accent for years and years. There's something to that. Continuity matters. And that's why I think DG comes back, and I don't know. I still think Mims comes back. I know he's back and forth, but I think another year of Washington the whole time, Mims the whole time, Dylan Gabriel the whole time, Jeff Levy the whole time, Brent, like, there's something to be said for that. And I think if we can just get a bit of continuity in Norman for a little while, I think we would be all the better for it.
Yeah. I completely agree. I want DG back. I think a lot of people have overreacted to DG struggles during the year, and he had pieces where he did for sure. So I don't mean to make light of that, but when you're talking about a guy that went 24 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, I mean that it's not like everybody in college football does that all the time. Like that's the thing that I struggle with is people being like, oh, like we need to go get somebody else. I'm just like, man, like we got a 5-star coming in. If DG does the same thing next year, like at least the same production, hopefully the defense is better and it wins us more games, right? Because there are plenty of games where the defense was not where it probably should have been in terms of, performance-wise, obviously, and that probably cost us a couple games. Not one game can I think of besides, partially West Virginia, which was not his fault, where the offense, cost us the game, and obviously Texas, he was hurt. So does he make every play that needs to be made? Is he Baker, Kyler, or Jalen, or Caleb? No. But as Travis has said many times on this show and elsewhere, he shouldn't have to be. He shouldn't have to be. That's not our goal. Stetson Bennett doesn't have to be. Now, Stetson Bennett's been great and really good.
Been very impressive.
Been very great, and he has just nuts of steel, right? But, are we going to say he's as talented as, Caleb Williams, as Bryce Young, as CJ Stroud? No, because he's not. But that's okay, right? Because at the end of the day, he makes plays that needs to be made, and his teammates pick him up as well. So I think if anything, I want to see from DG next year, just a little bit more, hopefully, confidence in making plays that need to be made. I saw some great signs at Florida State. Like I wish we would have seen him run more timely, kind of like he did against Florida State and Cheez It Bowl. I think if he can, bring that repertoire out next year, or have that in his bag next year, then I think it could be really good, and he would be able to leeway into Jackson Arnold a la 2024 going to the SEC, ready to set the world on fire. We're coming for you, Ty.
Bring it. Well, no, if I could piggyback off of a few things you said, whenever you talked about like the defense, I think if you have your end of the year defense that we saw against Florida State, you do probably escape with a win or more, right? Like on your schedule, no doubt about it. And one thing I also want to add here, it's something I said the year before, and I think I got a bit of flack for it, but I think now people understand. Not all wins and losses are created equal. Right. Like, yes, in college football, winning is winning, losing is winning. The most important thing is that you win, but it's not black and white. This is gray. I'll give you the perfect example. Beating the Citadel by 3 points is a win, but it is not as impressive as beating Georgia this year by 21 points. Both are wins. Both are wins. One of them is a far more impressive win than the other. Much like losing to the Citadel and losing to Georgia are both losses. But if you lose to the Citadel by 21 points as opposed to losing to Georgia by 3 points, those losses are a little bit different, right? So the nuance absolutely matters here. And then the second thing I'll say here, to piggyback off of what Travis said, I think Mims, it would absolutely serve him to come back another year. I think his grade only improves. We know how talented he is. Farouk is really getting implemented into this offense. We see Levy loves to utilize him in a lot of creative ways, which is only going to free up more opportunity for Marvin Mims so that he's not going to be seeing so much attention from safeties whenever you watch the teams play him and you just see the safety staring at him all game. Farouk can help alleviate that. Yeah, I'm super interested to see what happens with Marvin Mims.
Yeah, well, we will certainly see. I know all Sooner Nation is waiting to see what he says. Having him back would be huge for that room. And we believe we have a lot of talent coming back in that room as is, obviously, as we talked about. But yeah, no, I'm excited. Here's what we'll end on. I think this will be a funny one to end on for my homie and my brother Trav. I'll let him answer this question because I already know what he's gonna say. Now that we have Barnchuck as up and coming stars, where does Marcus Major factor in that rotation?
The same place that he's factored for the other 4 years of his career. He will be um,
They're praying on Trav's downfall.
Yeah, I know.
Dang.
you got
They're
me?
not gonna let him answer the
You got me?
question. That's,
Yeah,
yeah,
we
we
can
got
hear
you
you
now.
now.
Okay, cool. I'll turn the camera on. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you heard, but he will be likely in the same place that he's been throughout his career at Oklahoma. He'll be third guy on the depth chart, most likely, by the end of the season. We'll see about Emeka Megwa to see if he has recovered enough from an injury to be the player that he once was or what he was once projected to be, because he
Yeah.
could absolutely be a goal line type presence. He's built more like a linebacker, but he still carries the ball. Dalen Smothers might have something to say about it, might be a freshman that has something to say. Caleb Hicks, obviously, Tommy Walker. Like, there are plenty of other guys that maybe have more eligibility down the road that you might like to get snaps, but I wish Marcus nothing but the best, but it's pretty clear we're going to have a 1-2 punch next year of two guys that are each probably 3 years younger than him.
Not only are they younger, they may fit what Levy wants to do better. And that is going to be tough. And especially when we talk about Sawchuk. I mean, that kid is going to be a problem for the Big 12. A genuine problem. The way Levy can utilize him. And I'm interested to see if we get some Yamaha. Because I think you put both of those backs in the backfield at the same time. Remember, I've been praying for this all season long. All I wanted as an Alabama fan was a package with Bryce Young, Jace McClellan, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Put the defense in hell. You pick. And the other one's going to hurt you. You want to talk about putting a defense in a tough position. You put that Yamaha package out there with Sawchuk and Barnes. Whew, that's going to be tough to stop. Marcus Majors is a very talented back. I don't think there's any question about it, but it's going to be tough when these other guys are emerging. They're young and they're very talented and they fit the scheme.
Yeah, those two, they have OU fans talking about P. Ryan and Nixon. When you bring those two names up, just what they did here at OU, nothing short of just about 10 years, or not 10 years ago, I'm tripping, 5-6 years ago. That's lofty atmosphere. So for them to be in the same class and to potentially, be able to do what they're going to do is going to be exciting. I was wondering, man, was he just not ready? Was he just, did he pick up a little bit more weight? Did he not know the playbook? Because I'm like, if that's how he looks and looked, man, I don't know. Like, I feel like he should have been getting
Well,
some carries.
I think something you have to remember, not only did Aaron Gray have a great season, but also like how important, especially when you run a lot of those RPOs. Like when you drop back to passing, you've got, at times this year a makeshift offensive line, especially in the bowl game.
Yeah.
When you have
Yeah.
those guys that are freshmen, they're a little bit slimmer maybe than they need to be. If they're having to take on and pass protect and they can't do it, then you won't play. So that's part of the problem, as we saw even at Florida State. Yeah, we saw a couple blitz pickups by him, but the pass protection is what gets you on the field if you're, playing for DeMarco Murray. So I think that's what took maybe Sawchuk a little bit of time. He needed to get his body a little bit bigger, needed to be able to take on those blocks from those blitzes, and I think that's what kind of slows down the pace. Because you think about it, it's like, man, why don't we all have a small, fast freshman back there all the time? It's like, yeah, because eventually some big old linebacker, some 6'4", 230 dude's going to be coming through that hole full speed, and you're gonna have to cut him in half. So figure it out. So I think that's a lot of why we didn't see him early.
Yeah. Which makes
he speaks no lies. He speaks. Jahmyr Gibbs got taken out of almost an entire game, if I'm not mistaken, because they called a blitz and he didn't pick it up, and Bryce got creamed. In came Jace. He 100%. 100% everything he said is 1,000% accurate. Blitz pickups, especially in those schemes, are so big.
Yeah. No, they are, and that was a great point. Great point. Great counterpoint for sure. But I'm excited, man, about the future.
They're freaking great, man. Yeah. They're so fun to watch.
Yeah, that's gonna be exciting. So lots of things to look forward to. Obviously, again, guys, we'll be back here next Wednesday. We'll talk about the national championship game, see how it went. As I said, we'll be trying to get more guests on here. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit of softball, basketball, baseball. We will do all that stuff. But you already know you can find your Sooner football content here every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Ty, thanks for coming on the show, brother. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Love coming on.
Appreciate you, Brent.
Always welcome. And I'm going to shout out my guy, the DGD podcast. My brother, good luck on Monday. I'm rooting against you. I'm not going to lie to you.
I'm rooting against you.
No, I am. That's my guy, but I want TCU to win. We'll see what happens.
Oh, no.
But, with that being said, we're going to get out of here. We're going to let Trav get back to Norman safely. Trav, do you have anything you want to say to people before we head out?
Go to the basketball games, people. Go to the basketball games. Every time I take a picture and tweet out, everybody's like, man, light crowd. Well, come on then. Come join me. I got seats for you. Come on. But no, in all seriousness, Ty, appreciate you coming on. JP, appreciate you guys always. Appreciate everybody who interacted, specifically those who liked the video. I'm much more appreciative of the people that liked the video. All you people that didn't, I appreciate you a lot less. So hit the like, but I'm going to get my focus back on the road. Have not wrecked yet, so I think I'll focus back on that. Appreciate y'all.
Yes, sir. We'll talk to everybody next week. We'll see you at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Don't forget to tune in to Around the Table Sports. Subscribe there. See what Ty's doing over there. Always got great stuff. You may catch me on there every once in a while. I ain't been on in a minute because I'm
try to get you on every Monday and Friday.
I know. I'm busy.
I don't get invited to that cool stuff.
Well, you have an open invitation.
Mm-hmm. Hey, everybody tune in to K-Rep tomorrow and Friday. It'll be me and old Teddy Lehman from 2 to 6. Now that we're doing the program.
I'm going to have to tune into that one. You and Big Ted.
Yeah, Teddy, it's a lot of fun with Teddy.
Oh, I'm sure that'll be exciting. But nah, for real. Like I said, I appreciate you, Ty. We'll catch y'all back here next week. Boomer.
Roll